podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
I had the very great pleasure of being in two near-death incidents on the plane. Well, they weren't. I'm exaggerating, but it was a very windy landing into Salt Lake City yesterday, and therefore I missed the West Brom game. I'm thinking I had the better thing.
On balance, I'd rather not nearly die in a plane crash, but it's close. Certainly, it was a bit like watching a car crash, watching United's performance, and I mean. Have you seen any of it? Have you managed to get? Have you wasted any of your precious life watching any of the highlights of this game?
No, haven't seen a minute of it. It was just a turnaround in Salt Lake, and I'm now in California. And I had a dinner last night, and then couldn't keep my eyes open.
Well, watching the game would not have helped you keep your eyes open. I mean, 2 weeks ago we recorded a podcast which was full of kind of gloom and doom. Then we had really kind of joyful, but, joyful with caveats podcast last week. I don't know what to say about this game that isn't hugely depressing. My old boss sent me an email after the game saying he'd happily pay for Jose's plane ticket to PSG at this point. And it was hard not to feel like that after the game. I mean, the players were an absolute shambles, a disgrace. Like, genuinely, this game turned me into a reactionary, kind of wanting to shout at my telly, how much are you being paid? And this is what you're serving up? Is that kind of really reductive analysis. But it was atrocious. So, West Brom set up with essentially most of the time 8 to 10 men behind the ball when United had possession. And United, as we've seen so many times in the Van Halen, also the Mourinho era, although less so. This was pure Van Gaal. Couldn't find a way through. Pogba, playing in his preferred 4-3-3, awful. Like, hardly ever ahead of the ball, wasteful on the ball, just almost like last week had gone to his head or something. Just terrible. Or, actually, more likely, this is kind of a reversion to type to an extent because of what Mourinho's done to his overall confidence, and so he's not really able to handle himself at the moment. But yeah, dropping deep to pick up the ball off the defenders, even though it's, Matic and Herrera are both there, supposed to do his running for him. We're not seeing him ahead of the ball nearly often enough. Not the only player who played badly. All the midfielders, in fact, were dreadful. So I mentioned West Brom playing 8 to 10 men behind the ball. That didn't stop United looking whatever the opposite of press resistant is. Completely non-resistant to the mildest suggestion of a press. Just turning over possession in midfield. West Brom counter-attack. Like, West Brom they won the game. I haven't looked at the XG, but just from the eye test, West Brom fully deserved to win that game. They didn't have the lion's share of possession by any stretch of the imagination, but Ben Foster made one good save, and De Gea made one good save in the first half, and West Brom they just looked more dangerous than United. On the Touchline Fracas podcast, somebody said expensive West Brom got beat by actual West Brom, which, ouch.
Wow.
It was.
They've got a pretty good record against United in recent years. West Brom, been causing us all kinds of problems.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it's. I haven't seen the game, so obviously can't comment on that. But it's pretty extraordinary, given the performance in the second half last week, given the high that everybody was on, and the fact that Jose talked about there being no complacency and they've worked against it. For United to come out with a performance like this against the bottom side, who haven't got a manager. Yeah, even if they go and park the bus, and fair play to West Brom for parking the bus. What else were they going to do?
And they parked the bus with a bit of intent to counter-attack as well, which got them rewards. Right. I think the corner came from a counter-attack. Oh, what a surprise! United conceded from a corner. Lukaku lost his man, I thought, There's generally awful organisation all round in the box for the. It's just pathetic. That's the only way I can describe it. And Mourinho, I realised that the thing that crossed the line for me with all three of our last managers hasn't been the performances on the pitch, although they were dismal. The thing that really gets to me is what they say afterwards. Like, that's the thing that really breaks me. And Moyes, like, we talked about it ad nauseum, the extent to which he mismanaged a public image. And Van Gaal, having sort of talked about building a championship-winning side in his opening press conference, then kind of massively playing down expectations in his second season. And Mourinho, after this game, was just foul. How many times in his post-match press conference did he say he'd won 8 championships? There's 4 or 5 mentions, and that is pathetic. He said, I know how to win, but I don't play. Well, by the way, as a player, you didn't make it. That's why you didn't play. But if you knew how to win, he said all week, like you said, he was talking about trying to manage the complacency. Well, in the post-match press conference, all he did was say, oh, yeah, the players were too happy after last week. That's why they lost this week.
Yeah, but he talked about that beforehand.
Yeah.
I think it's... Look, I haven't, obviously, didn't see the game, so I don't know what percentage of this was complacency by the players, which is, obviously unacceptable if you're a Manchester United player. And I'd say the 75% of my Twitter timeline seem to be blaming the players. But Jose never takes responsibility. I mean, the basics of 2 years into the job now, United shouldn't be conceding quite so many goals from corners. The structure of the team shouldn't be changing every week, seemingly on the basis that he doesn't know exactly what his best team is yet. The players should not have a question about motivation. Clearly, that is the manager's job. So there are obviously a whole bunch of questions that can be pointed at Jose, and he never seems willing to accept that. And the kind of revisionism of pointing back to his trophies and saying, oh, look, it was 3 years ago, my last title, not 20 years ago. Sly dig at Arsene Wenger there, maybe, perhaps. It's just kind of pointless because... this is the United side that will probably finish second, or maybe not if we have more performances like this, I guess. And he did win 2 trophies last year. We could well win an FA Cup final, a shot at a trophy there. So it's progress, but it's progress in a pretty ugly and sometimes dispiriting fashion, it seems.
Yeah, and just the, one of the managers, people blaming the players, I get it. The players should perhaps take more responsibility, and maybe in the second half against City, we saw what happens when this team does take responsibility for its own performance, because that's generally the gist of what's come out. But surely an absolutely fundamental cornerstone of a manager's job is to build the team's collective mentality. We're United fans. We saw what happened when you have a manager who can do that like no other. This is Mourinho's greatest failing in a lot of ways, is that he can't do it. He's never done it. He's done it for short periods of time, which he hasn't even done here, and he's done it with certain key players, but he's never managed to build lasting squad cohesion that he was a part of. And No, that's right. And I wonder whether there isn't some kind of Napoleon complex here because of his failure as a player. And deep down, he actually resents some of these players, and that's why he feels the need to take them down a peg or two too frequently. Well, maybe it's that. I mean, he has often said that he's talked about his philosophy of management through conflict, and he's not the only high-powered official who, seeks to generate conflict to stir something. But I just think it's a particularly... Well... It's very evidently not a good way to build long-term success and loyalty. I mean, listen, the players' performances were way, way, way below what they should have been in that game. And whilst I can be kind of critical of Mourinho for his role in that, which he would kind of assert that he doesn't have any role in that, the players do have a degree of collective responsibility. Yeah. If it's true that they got so high after beating City that they thought they were untouchable against West Brom, then fair enough. But, it It was genuinely. I mean, if I was one of them, I would be really embarrassed about that performance.
Yeah, but we've seen this a few times this season. I mean, this isn't isolated, is it? The highs against some of the bigger sides. We talked last week about how actually United's record against the top six is now getting better.
Yep.
1.7 something points per game against the top six, so improving, and it was pretty bad under Mourinho. And then the lows, Sevilla, other games where United have lost after big games. So there's definitely a problem there. For Mourinho, he thinks he's 100% the players, and he keeps telling everyone that. But ultimately, he's the man in charge. He's the man that has to develop the strategy, both for squad building and tactics, and the patterns of play, and has to get the most out of the players he's got. And build players' confidence up and be a bit more multifaceted in how he manages players. But so far, I'd say it's a sort of B- on that one. But I don't want to be, I think it's probably also fair to say, I don't know how many, there can't be too many managers who would help United move forward as quickly as Mourinho has, right? So from outside European places and absolutely nowhere to... probably finish second and maybe winning a third trophy in 2 seasons. So there's definitely been progress. For me, there's a constant, sort of incessant nagging in the back of my head that says, I don't know whether Mourinho could take this lot much further. If you cannot get good performances out of Pogba, Sanchez, Martial, Rashford, Mata, Lukaku on a weekly basis, that's a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really valuable and important point that you made about Mourinho in terms of how quickly the ship's been stabilised. There is a but there. I don't know how relevant it is, because I don't know whether actually that caveat would still apply. But he's done that by spending absolutely eye-watering sums of money. Now, Van Gaal had a lot of money and he used it poorly. I think... obviously, the numbers are astronomically bigger than Mourinho, but we've seen kind of record levels of transfer inflation. I think in terms of the kind of ballpark area of where, the amounts being paid, Van Gaal was basically spending as much as Mourinho in terms of, relative to the rest of the football world that summer. You'd have to look up the data to see where that's true, but that would be my kind of instinctive feeling about it. So, but he has had huge money and he's bought a bunch of superstar players. But you're right, he has brought about a great deal of change very quickly. And one last point about the West Brom game. So there's 8 players in the side that had more than 50 passes in that game. That's how much of the ball United saw. And the only ones of those players who aren't at 90% pass completion or better are Mata, Young and Sanchez, who were all trying to be progressive with their passing. Have all got kind of crosses and stuff in there that are generally the kind of numbers that knock your pass completion percentage down. So, we were rotating the ball, keeping the ball, trying to create chances, but there was a horrible bluntness to United, and there is. Martial and Rashford are both on the bench. Now, I'm not saying if either of those two had been on the pitch from the start, this game would have been different. But we talked about the 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3 dilemma and all this kind of stuff. And one of the things that was saying is against West Brom at home, you can absolutely play Pogba in a 2-man midfield. And he absolutely could have done that, but he didn't. And it's hard to criticise him too much for that because everyone's been crying out for the 4-3-3 and it worked in that second half against City. So maybe he's just kind of trying to bed it in, get all the players used to it ahead of the semi-final. But when Pogba was hooked after 57 minutes, I mean, I've seen it argued that was about kind of keeping him fresh and ready for next week. But given that that's a long way and there's another game in between, it was hard not to see that as another punishment beating,
Yeah, where does Mourinho go from here? I mean, it seems like he's going to be given lots of money in the summer. United will definitely spend on 2 fullbacks, I'd assume. And attacking fullbacks, useful attacking fullbacks would make a big difference to this side. Although, I think you could argue that Ashley Young has actually had a pretty decent season. I mean, England's best left-back, Young, TM. But two attacking fullbacks will make a big difference against, especially in a 4-3-3 system, and especially with players like Mata and Sanchez inside who want to cut inside all the time. I guess he'll bring in another midfielder, but he has to be able to get the best out of a player like Paul Pogba. He has to be able to, otherwise United can't progress, and it can't just be, we're going to bin him off and get some more functional player in because that's what Mourinho likes. So anyway, there's I don't see how Mourinho wins a title for United, I have to say, and I'd love to eat my words on that in 2 years' time or something like that. But I would imagine he'll scorch the earth before we ever get there. But we'll see, and let's hope United are able to pick it up for the Spurs game. I guess the Bournemouth game doesn't really count for much, but the Spurs game next weekend is the biggest game of the season, absolutely critical. Otherwise, United are going to finish the season with no trophies and City winning the league and bloody Liverpool winning the European Cup.
The thing about Mourinho not winning the league with United that it's probably worth saying is I feel completely the same way about it, but I wouldn't be surprised to be wrong, given that this would be the first time Mourinho had ever had a job since his kind of ascension to the level of a team that could potentially win the title. So since Porto, this would be the first job where he didn't win the title, which that would be a kind of seismic shift, especially given the resources at his disposal. That really would indicate that he's properly yesterday's man and he's finished. And it feels like that at the moment, but we do know these things can change. But I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying I'm holding a caveat in reserve that actually it still wouldn't be that shocking if Jose Mourinho won a league title. Given, I don't know if you know this, Ed, but he's won 8 championships.
Really,
Yeah.
eight.
A tiny one.
Perhaps we can get some T-shirts done with 9 on them, just in waiting.
I've one last point I wanted to make about the West Brom game. Lots of people criticising United for a lack of width in that game, but in the second half we started to go wide and hammered a whole bunch of crosses in. So somewhere around 20 crosses went in that game, and West Brom just dealt with them all day, every day. So like the idea that kind of getting out wide and banging in crosses was the way to stretch that defence was pretty obviously not accurate, although United's best chance did come, I think, from across the one really good save that Foster made.
So, having stopped City from winning the title at their own place last weekend, which everyone enjoyed thoroughly, we handed it to them on a plate. City champions. I guess that was always just a matter of time anyway. Yeah. And I guess if they were going to win it being fairly meek with them not playing is a better way of doing it, but they've been lauding it up, including absolutely cringe-worthy videos. just awful, just truly corporatism at its worst. But worthy champions, basically. They've been significantly better than any other team in the league this season.
Yeah, they've been significantly better than any other team in the league since 2008. I think it's probably fair to say. They are an absolutely superb side. And, we can say they won it meekly by United losing, but they also won it by absolutely smashing Spurs at Wembley.
Yeah, they were completely dominant in that game. I mean, Spurs got back into it, but they were extremely good value for that victory. And I guess righted the ship after the mini blip of losing to Liverpool twice and to United. Interesting, before the Spurs game, Pep talked about City not necessarily winning the league, as if the wheels were about to fall off. It was a strange motivational strategy, but it seemed to work.
I wonder with Pep whether it isn't just actually an externalisation of his deepest fears, because he's a nervous man, Pep Guardiola.
Old fraud that he is,
yeah,
lucking his way to 25 titles or whatever he's got.
Yeah. That pass from De Bruyne to Sterling, that was just offensively good pass. But yeah, no, City are good. They won the league. They deserved to win the league. It was nice to stop them. It would have been much, much nicer not to then give it to them a week later by losing to the bottom team. The banter era continues, as they say. United are borderline as ridiculous as Arsenal. Not as bad as Arsenal, obviously.
No, clearly. I mean, Arsenal might finish behind Burnley.
Yeah, but
and given the momentum, it's quite possible. Yeah,
but as ridiculous.
Yes, it is. It's look since Fergie retired. This is now 5 seasons without the title since Fergie retired, and second will be the best place by some distance.
Yep.
If we finish second, it's definitely not guaranteed.
No,
it's a big if at this stage. Yeah. And during that time, about £700 million has been spent. So there has been investment. So I think what you can say is there's been, rank bad management of the club. They managed to make really huge amounts of income. Some of it just because of the globalization of football in the media market. So got fortunate with Champions League and Premier League TV rights. Some of it riding the crest of that globalization in terms of branding, and Real Madrid and Barcelona and Bayern Munich and Juve and a whole bunch of others done it too. And some of it, obviously, a very smart commercial strategy that has allowed United to continue to rake in piles and piles of money. But it's a club that's focused on that first and a winning team second, it seems. And I think Oliver Kay in the Times was making the point today that, yes, Pep has spent huge amounts of money, and he really has. But I think his hit rate, I mean, it's not 100%, but I think his hit rate's a lot better than United's in terms of buying the right players for the right positions and fitting them into a team. And that's why they're 16 points ahead of United.
And this is like
some money, but also spent better.
This is also an uncomfortable thing, but I think a huge reason that their hit rate is good is because Guardiola develops players. So their hit rate often looks really good because players who've struggled. I mean, Fabian Delph. He must have been on the books, so I can't imagine Guardiola bought him. But Fabian Delph has been a really important part of City's first team this season. Fabian Delph. And that's Pep. It doesn't work 100% of the time. There's certain players that he, doesn't get to those levels. So John Stones, it was sort of working earlier in the season and now he's out in the cold. But generally speaking, I think the hit rate isn't just about sensible acquisition. It's about what you do with those acquisitions once you've got them. And
no, for sure, yeah. I mean, flip around the managers. I mean, it's a fun thought experiment, isn't it? And have Pep in charge of this squad of United players and Mourinho in charge of that squad of City players. Would City be 16 points ahead? I'm thinking absolutely not.
No, I think that is the biggest argument that the people who are still rampantly pro Mourinho need to face up to. That's right then and there, and that's the argument. And those of us who are, really frustrated with Mourinho probably need to face up to the argument that you mentioned earlier, that he's brought about a level of change and solidity and improvement in our performance levels overall very quickly. So anyway, that is really enough of that. We've done it to death, and there's like 5 or something more episodes till the end of the season where it's going to be relevant every week. So it's going to... Sorry for retreading old coals. Have we got any Twitter questions?
Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. If United lose to Spurs at the weekend,
we'll just do all...
We're going to have to ramble on about the transfer market for 5 weeks in a row. The mercifully shortened transfer market.
All Twitter question episodes of the show every week from now to the end of the season if we lose to Spurs.
Yeah, I mean, top of the table. I mean, United's running's pretty decent, isn't it? And
well, does that matter? We just lost to West Brom.
Yeah, no, I know. I know. 71 points. Liverpool played a game more, 70 points. Spurs also 33 games, 67 points. Only 5 games to go and 4 for Liverpool. So, you'd put the odds with United finishing second, but only just. And really the performance levels are going to have to increase significantly above that against West Brom in order for that to happen. And like maybe second, third, and fourth doesn't matter, though fourth is into a playoff.
Yeah, fourth matters.
In the Champions League. Fourth matters, and maybe second or third doesn't matter. But Mourinho himself has made a big deal of that. He made a big deal of being better than all the others. So it could come back to bite him.
Well, and also it's like, there's a decent chance that it'll be Liverpool that finished above us. And that's always got to mean something, hasn't it, finishing above Liverpool?
It definitely means something, especially if they... No, I don't even want to think about it.
What an absolutely ridiculous week in the Champions League. Just all over the shop. When the fact that Juventus got so close to overturning the result, just like Roma had done. I mean, that was just baffling. But of course,
I mean, all of those. I mean, I guess the Bayern Sevilla tie was fairly tight. But Juve massive comeback. I thought Oliver got the decision, but I don't see how he can do anything other than give a penalty for that one, and then start abusing the referee. You're going to get a red card. So, and now his wife is being abused on Twitter. Lovely world we've got. But amazing comeback, and the Liverpool just completely outclassing City in both games was fascinating and weird. And then Roma with a stunning comeback against Barcelona, who are going to walk La Liga this season. This is not a crappy Barcelona side.
Well, nor is it a vintage Barcelona side by any stretch of the imagination. It's a Barcelona side that's easily good enough to win a La Liga side when no one else has quite done the business. Maybe it's a bit sort of United 2011, this Barca side, although better than that, obviously. Cristiano Ronaldo's penalty, it is an offensive level of self-belief that allows a man to do that in those circumstances. He's just got special powers. Cristiano Ronaldo has special powers of execution, special powers of performance in the Champions League, although his overall performance in this game is very poor, but especially absolutely world-beating powers in justifiably making everything about himself. Not just making everything about himself when it's not, like he did when he took his top off in the 4-1 against Atletico in the final the other season. But this was really all about him, and he made it all about him, and that is kind of impressive.
Yeah. Well, a couple of interesting semis there. Liverpool versus Roma. Roma haven't conceded any goals at home this season, so that'll be an interesting matchup with a Liverpool side that scored over 100 goals this season, and most goals in the Champions League, and Real Bayern, couple of giants. United need to be in there, don't they? This is what Mourinho's brought in for, to make us good enough so we are playing these big games.
The Mo Salah derby. Let's take some Twitter questions, because I know you're a bit pushed for time today, Ed.
Let's do it, and there have been plenty. And we're actually recording a podcast, which is, a good use of asking people to send us questions. Wasn't it nice of Jose to give Juan Mata a full match for once? Asked La False number 12. A friend of the show. Will you be giving Juan Mata full matches next season? That's perhaps the bigger question.
I mean, I would love him to stay, but you could see how... I mean, and I think it was pretty dreadful against West Brom, but you could see how there have been plenty of games this season where our attacks looks a lot better balanced, as we've discussed ad nauseum, with Mata in the side, so it would be a loss in that sense. But in terms of squad balance... you could argue that he is, to a degree, surplus to requirements, in that there's plenty of players who could take his place if he left, but I do think we'd lose something significant if we lost Mata.
Simon Stevens, friend of the show, says, was it kind of funny in a dark, horrible way, like the way Blue Velvet is a bit funny in the most horrible bits? One of my favourite films, Blue Velvet, as you probably wouldn't be surprised. Was it kind of... Yes, it was. There was some kind of dark... gallows humour irony to United beating City last weekend, only to throw it away against West Brom. So
it was hilarious.
I suppose so.
It's very fun. If you can't laugh at your team being bad, it's silly, isn't it? And United are silly.
Thomas Willoughby, another friend of the show, says, when will the nightmares end? I don't know, Tom. Don't know.
You just have to reconstruct the expectations of your dreams at this point, I think. Because I think there's a solid argument to say that the nightmare has ended. The nightmare ended the day that David Moyes left. And the rest of this has just been like a mildly bad dream ever since.
Yeah.
Also,
Brian
Liverpool
Fuentes, 16, B Fuentes 16 on Twitter says, is this an automated tweet? Yes, it was. And then he follows up with, should Jose put Luke Shaw on an incentive plan? Lose £5 you start the next game. I think Shaw's done. He'll be sold in the summer and we'll probably never see him again.
Yeah. Jose Mourinho should have done a lot of things with Luke Shaw, but he hasn't done any of them. Also, I think it's fair to say, from everything that I've heard from behind-the-scenes sources, Luke Shaw should have done a lot more too.
Yeah. It was interesting. Middle of the season, there were all those sort of, I guess, brief stories about how Shaw was the fittest man in the club and been working really hard, and apparently not. But United will move on, and we'll have to move on too. He's too good a player to blow his career, so I hope he doesn't, and he finds a good home. Unfortunately, it means, given his talent, that United will, at least in theory, at least, could well be spending millions and millions of pounds on an inferior player. Of course, if you can never get him on the pitch, then he's not the player you actually believe you have. Anyway, Man United 23, or at Man United 24, just to confuse us all, on Twitter says, "Come back, Paul."
No,
I'm not sure what he means.
I'm not.
Twitter, I guess.
I'm not coming back, my friend. I love you, but I'm not coming back. Email me.
Yahoo72 on Twitter says, "Why are we against teams?"
Well, we haven't really been this season. I mean, I haven't got the fixture list up in front of me, but I remember us beating a lot of people 4-0, plenty of people 2-0. There's been a lot of perfectly functional, serviceable performances against bad teams this season. So it's not a massive pattern. It's just like a recurrent blip. That is a pattern in and of itself, but it is not the only dominant pattern about United's performances against smaller teams this season, especially at Old Trafford.
And earlier in the season it was 4-0 FC, wasn't it?
Yeah. Gosh, that seems like another lifetime.
It really does. A whole bunch of people, what the hell was that? What was that? What was that? What have I just seen?
Honestly,
how bad was that?
Honestly, I know you didn't watch the game, right? But I can't stress this enough. It was appalling.
So in a ranking of post-Fergie bad matches, and there have been some shockers, how high is this? Is it top 5, top 10, top 1?
It's definitely not top 1. It's definitely not Midtjylland away. Midtjylland away. It's probably better than Sheffield United at home, although we did actually win that match. Middlesbrough at home in the League Cup. Remember that one?
Yeah. Olympiacos away, that was pretty bad under Moyes. Fulham at home, that was pretty bad. 82 crosses and all that.
I mean, it was worse than the Sevilla performance, I think. It was as bad as the Sevilla performance. Just really, really, really bad. Hardly created anything in spite of all of that possession. And like I said, every time we had the ball in midfield and they pressed us, we looked like we were going to lose it and turn over a massive chance against an absolutely rubbish team.
James Mayer, Mayer84 says, do we have enough faith in Mourinho to let him continue or alienate some of our best talent? What happens in the summer if he wants to get rid of Pogba and Martial?
We can't do this again.
Like he's got the backing of the club.
We can't do this. We can't do this again. We've done this every episode for the last 4 or 5 episodes. I'm not doing it again.
And we may have to do it for the next 5
skip
until the speculation stops.
Not this question this week. Sorry, James.
I think I am actually, I was being flippant earlier, but I think it's a very good move to cut the transfer window down so there isn't moves post the start of the season. Of course, that's not the same elsewhere in Europe, so there could be a whole bunch of clubs trying to buy players from Europe, from the Premier League, after the transfer window closes. But if all the European leagues eventually align, then we'll stop the nonsense of players trying to get pinched or bought or move after the season has actually started. So what the F? We have 100 questions this week, and I'd say a good 50% of them involve an F-bomb about the performances. Krish Pillay 1 on Twitter says, most managers would play attractive winning football with the talent they have. Is United a bridge too far for Mourinho? I mean, it's I don't know whether that's fair to put it that way, because look, he's managed and won titles with some of the biggest clubs in Europe, including Real Madrid. So, it's clearly not a job that's too big for him. Can he play attractive winning football? He can play winning football. Can he play attractive football? Well, that's sort of in the eye of the beholder. United are never going to play like Manchester City or Barcelona under Mourinho, though.
But there is an argument to say that the Real Madrid job was too big for him. He was there for quite a long time, and he did win a title against one of the best club sides of all time. But he did salt the earth. He did split the dressing room. He did poison the Spanish national team nearly. He did a lot of damage there and wasn't able to win the Champions League, which is the sort of minimum requirement of a Real Madrid manager. So I'm not saying his time at Madrid was a complete flop, but I think, this is not an original thought. It's been said many times, but the teams where Mourinho has done best are teams where it is generally acceptable to the community that he represents that team should be an underdog. So Porto, Inter, Chelsea, all happy to be the underdog on the big European stage. United, Real Madrid, very much not.
So I was very happy to talk this week to Wayne Barton, United fan, and many of you will know him from the Twitter sphere. He's written 5 or 6 books on United now, and his latest one is just out, called The Man Who Kept the Red Flag Flying. It's an autobiography of Jimmy Murphy, who, of course, famously had a significant role in United's youth and academy teams during the 50s and 60s, and also took over from Matt Busby after the 58 crash. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Wayne Barton to the show. Long-time online friend, I'd say. He's written a new book on the great Jimmy Murphy called The Man Who Kept the Red Flag Flying High. And it's your 5th or 6th book now. You did autobiographies of Clayton Blackmore and Gordon Hill, which I think did pretty well, and Mick Duxbury, and one on Fergie and United in the mid-70s. Huge collection of work behind you now.
Yeah, a nice varied body of work as well, from different things. Danny Higginbottom as well, who I think is the slightly biased, but I think he's the premier pundit in Britain at the moment. So I've been fortunate to work with a lot of names across, the last 40, 50 years, really.
I agree with you there. I think Higginbottom is the best pundit in any form of British media at the moment. Very, very, very intelligent, and certainly hasn't sort of become a parody of himself, which some others may have done. So tell me, what was the inspiration behind the new book on Jimmy Murphy? Obviously, a really important figure in United's history. What prompted you to write this book now?
Well, one of the books that I've written was the Fergie's Fledglings book, and obviously that took in the complete era under Ferguson and the youth development from day one to the last day, really. How that changed, how he changed and evolved with the times. And at the same time, I was working with Mick Duxbury on his book, and we had a conversation one time where he was talking about a players' do that he was at, and Jimmy had approached him. Mick's not the most fashionable player, but Jimmy had approached him and said that he wouldn't look out of place in the Babes side, and he got really emotional when he was telling me that story. And he never. There's a lot of emotional points in his life. Obviously, everyone goes through them, but that's the one time I could see him get choked up about it, and that stayed with me a little bit. And then I was fortunate enough to interview Harry Gregg, and it was one of those things where I sort of got hooked up to his grandson, and I didn't have a reason for the interview or anything, or a purpose. There was no way or where I was going to use it, really. But we ended up talking mostly about Jimmy, and these conversations happened around the same time, around the same time as me finishing the book as well. So I just thought, there's a little bit more here to scratch the surface. I'm aware, most United fans are aware, aren't they, with the basics of Jimmy's story. But once I started scratching the surface on that, I thought, I want to see if there's enough material, enough there fresh to justify writing a full book on it, and it quickly became apparent that there was.
So, of course, Jimmy's most associated, I guess, with the aftermath of the Munich air disaster and his role in steering the team in Samat's absence, but also a significant part of United's youth development. So, what do you, looking back now, what do you think your assessment of Jimmy's importance to United during that period was?
Busby looked after the first team, and Jimmy basically ran everything below the first team, and that's not an overstatement. And yeah, again, I am slightly biased, and you do the research and you get involved in it, and you tend to sort of think, well, his fingerprints are on everything. But I mean, this is a guy who he was involved in the recruitment of the players. He was the one who was overseeing the day-to-day development of them in not only the youth team but the Central League as well. And he was the one who went to Busby and told them that these players were ready. So he was involved in a massive part of these kids' development. There was things like, he would take them back to his house with his family, and he had a big family. He had, 4 or 5 kids, and the players would go back there. His kids, his son Nick often jokes that if he had a bed at Old Trafford, he would have slept there. He loved the club that much. He absolutely, everything, he lived and breathed Manchester United. So, like you said, he's rightly mostly remembered for what happened after Munich, but before everything that happened with the Babes went through him anyway. And that's not to downplay Busby's importance with that, because once they went to the first team, he obviously polished them up and had them playing the attractive football that they did. But everything in terms of the personality, the arrogance, their expression, the togetherness and everything, that was all taught and embedded by Jimmy and Bert Wally and the other coaches as well. But Jimmy was overseeing that as the sort of mastermind behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course the Jimmy Murphy Young Player of the Year award instigated after his death in the late 80s. So what's the process you go through when thinking about writing a historical book? Obviously the other books that you've done on United players, they're all live and you can talk to them and dig into their story. And obviously Jimmy's been gone for nearly 20 years now. So how did you approach writing this book? What sort of sources did you use? And was that a different process? Did you enjoy that in the way that you've done with your other books?
Oh yeah, it was very different and challenging but entertaining. I mean, I was working on it for 4.5 years, really, all told. First of all, going to his family, getting interviews, talking to them about, talking to as many members of the family as I could about what it was like as a person, as a father, as a grandfather, that sort of thing, how they saw him as a coach, their memories of him at the good and bad times, and in later life as well. Obviously, working with the different people, I've been fortunate to, whenever I would do an interview, like say if I was doing it on the 74-75 book, which I did, I would sort of drop in questions about Jimmy to Tommy Docherty and everything like that. So I'd be picking up little bits along the way. And sort of like, I had an idea of how it was going to go. You've got the sort of, obviously, his early life, so try and do as much research as you can on that, which involved, watching every documentary I could find, old newspaper clippings and everything like that, family records, going up through all that, all the old books, everything that was like, I thought it was important as well because there's plenty of stuff published after Munich, but I thought the really interesting stuff was, there was a lot of stuff published just before Munich, which I thought was really interesting because it painted a different picture, like Busby's own recollections of how things were going at the time. So a lot of stuff like that, old newspaper clippings, like I already said, and there was a lot of stuff, a lot of material there to actually work from. I was actually, one of the things that I was most interested in, because it was a contemporary thing, and I was left with the impression that there was a lot of Jimmy's influence still remaining on the club, and I wanted to sort of dig deeper and see how true that was, or whether that was, again, just my bias coming through, or my own, this conclusion that I come to myself. So I made it a purpose to try and, I knew that I could probably get an interview with Paul McGuinness because he's always been fairly forthcoming with stuff like that. I tried to, reached out to Sir Alex Ferguson, and for a long time I wasn't getting anywhere, and then I, managed to get an interview with him. So those two people I thought were very important to sort of paint the picture of the legacy that he left, which I think is important in terms of educating modern supporters as well, and myself, because it was an education for myself in there to talk to these people and, see, is there anything there about how Jimmy's methods and his coaching and his ideology and everything like that, how much of that was remaining on the club. And even though, I was leading it myself, I was leading with the questions and I had my own ideas and theories behind it. Their approach and their response absolutely blew me away, in terms of how open they were about how deep his influence still ran on the club. So there was a lot of material to work for, and obviously interviews with lots of players who were coached under him and everything like that, players who were scouted by him in later life. So there was a lot of material there, more than what I thought, because I'm reading the newspaper articles and everything like that, and I'm thinking, well, if this stuff was quite widely known at the time, why isn't his story more widely known? Because everyone just sort of dismisses it as the Busby Babes, and Jimmy's an afterthought. And yeah, it was crazy to me that it's not more widely known, really.
Yeah, there's a few historians I know, and one said that if you really want the true story of what happened, don't go to the major historical figure, because the CEOs or the presidents, they're too polished about what they want to say. It's the middleman. It's the tier below. They're the people who really want to tell you the truth. And I don't know whether some of that came through in your interviews, but it's often the more colourful stories than the main man. But also, of course, the one that doesn't capture the narrative, and it's probably why there aren't dozens of books about Jimmy Murphy before now. You talked a little bit about his legacy. I mean, it's a very different world now. Of course, youth football is globalised, and you see Manchester United's academy and especially City and Chelsea and others stuffed with players acquired from overseas. How do you think Jimmy Murphy from the 50s would have viewed the world of youth football today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I've been lucky enough, having written the book and done a few interviews. That's the first time anyone's asked me that question. I think football's changed so much that he would have embraced it. I mean, yeah, they were recruiting local players, but they were also, he went and scouted Bobby Charlton from, in the northeast. He went down to the Midlands. Yeah. They went down to London to get David Sadler, obviously over to Ireland many times as well. I think he would have embraced it, and he loved travelling overseas and everything like that. So I think he would have loved to go around the world and see these different players. The other thing which was interesting, and is kind of attached to this, is that Jimmy's his coaching methods came from a good friend of his, Jimmy Hogan, who was heavily involved in the Hungarian side, the great Hungarian side. So that gives you an idea of how influenced he was by and how intrigued he was by the Continental, I think. I mean, also he was involved in the Blue Star tournament, when they set that up to get the young players' European experience. So United were there were four runners in that anyway, and Jimmy was at the heart of that. And I think he would have loved and embraced it. And it's one of those great things, isn't it? If only he was here to get his thoughts on that, because we can only sort of guess at that. But that's my idea. I think he would have loved it. I mean, people have this romanticised idea where, of course, you would love 11 Manchester lads to be in the side, but it's just not practical. It wasn't practical then, it didn't happen then, and it's not practical now. So this idea of having, again, you extend that to British, and perhaps that's probably as far as it goes. But I think, Busby and Murphy would have embraced it, the idea of a global team. I think they would have been all for it.
Well, certainly the fans have. I think there's still, and it's kind of ingrained in the culture of the club, really, that there's a passion for players coming through the academy into the first team, whether they're successful or not. And I hope that doesn't change. I don't know whether you have a perspective on that. Do you think the sort of demand for instant gratification that we get in the world of Twitter and YouTube has changed that culture of being patient and waiting to see the flower bloom?
Yeah, I think it undoubtedly has. I mean, you can look at, like I said, just look at the reactions online. It's ridiculous that I mean, Jimmy Murphy took 6 or 7 years for the fruits of his labour to sort of to bloom, really. It's a strange one because, I mean, you asked me that question and, let's take an example, Cameron Borthwick-Jackson. I thought he was one of the better prospects under Van Gaal. He came in, he looked like not brilliant, but he had a really good cross on him. That's one thing that I remembered. He'd never let us down defensively, and he had a really good cross on him. And I thought, at that time when you got Fosu Mensah coming through, Rashford making waves, it was worth sticking with. And we're left with, Darmian and the very average foreign players. And I don't want to get down that road of foreign play, but there's a truth to it there. And in cases like Darmian, and there are a couple of others in the team as well, you just think, well, we are better off having the younger players in. I mean, Mourinho, this is the thing about the short-term managers. I mean, Moyes, it was difficult for him because he didn't get a chance, but at least he's British and he's observed it at close quarters, that how United are run, basically. He saw all that. And then Van Gaal should have known better because, and really, he did bring in some players as well. So I'm not beating them with that stick, but they were so short term that relying on it as a method is a bit difficult. But one thing I would have thought Mourinho would have learned was that, the Palace game last season, for a dead rubber game at the end of the season, Old Trafford got behind those kids, and the way that they get behind Rashford, and they'll forgive a mistake from the younger players, whereas they get on the back of the more experienced players. Probably is the right to do so, but it does a lot for the atmosphere in the ground and everything like that to play these young lads, and it's such a potential advantage. I know Borthwick-Jackson's probably a bad example, but you get where I'm coming from. Fosu Mensah's another one. I mean, and he's not even local, but he's a young player coming through. How well he did in those first few games, probably even more impressive in general performance than what Rashford was. And you just think there's an opportunity there for the crowd to get behind these players, and the managers see them more often than what we do. Obviously, they see them every day, but I just think that there's an advantage there to be had that they could use, and it does tie in with the club's identity as well, and that's the nice thing. So you don't want to lose that anyway. I don't like the idea of it being like, this record that's gone on for so long and just including players in as a token. I don't think that we've got to that level yet, just the token selection. But you do wonder sometimes if it's getting close to that, don't you? So,
yeah, I have to say I may have made a side bet with my podcast co-host Paul that it would be broken, that record under Mourinho, but that doesn't appear to be the case. And I guess some of the younger players are struggling, well, Rashford in particular is struggling to get a regular start for the club at the moment, but perhaps Mourinho hasn't eschewed youth in quite the way some people thought he might do. Anyway, look, it was really great chatting to you. I'll cut this a little short, only to save the ears of the listeners who will be listening for hours otherwise. So, do you have thoughts on the next book after this one?
I'm working on 2. One's pretty much finished, and they're similar themes really. I've been working on one that's the sort of post-Ferguson evolution of what the current United identity is, and how far we've strayed from that, how difficult it is for these managers who had shorter contracts and shorter expectancy really in the job, how difficult it is for them to live up to it. And also another one that's essentially finished. We're just tying up the ends of what happens this season. we can more or less see how it's going, but the FA Cup really doesn't make that big a difference to the overall plan of it for the last 5 years. But another one along the same lines is the sort of the 26-year wait, from 67 to 93.
Right.
I know that there's Betrayal of a Legend, which is phenomenal, and I'm not even going to touch on that. But I do think there's room for a different perspective in terms of the tactics, how the club sort of failed under O'Farrell, and McGuinness, and how they started to rebuild and how close they were under Doherty. And because that's one thing, I mean, obviously I've done a lot under the Doherty era, and again, there's another great book on that, Devils by Sean Egan. But this idea of, the 76, 77 side, and their lost potential, because Doherty was sacked, how far could they have gone? Could they have been the side to win the league? Obviously, they never did it under Sexton, but this sort of stopping and starting and everything like that, and it's compelling to work on it because I'm sorry to go on about it, but because I've been working on it so much for the last few weeks. It's so compelling to look at this, the football in the early 70s and under O'Farrell, and how the evolution of the game has changed so much, but some of the footballing issues are still the same. All this kind of regeneration within the game, and Best was in his height of superstardom, and nobody knew how to deal with him. And it's sort of like all this kind of thing of what we see today. The modern player, nobody knows how to deal with them because they've got untold riches, and so how do you motivate them and everything like that? And there are so many strong parallels and again differences as well that it is really interesting to work on. And I mean, I can't say that I'm going to find a conclusive answer for why we failed in those years, but shedding a different perspective on it is something that I'm intending to do. And I do think United were a lot closer than what people like to believe that we were in the because they were lean years. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, you look at the likes of Villa and Forest who won European Cups after Doherty was sacked, and it does give you cause to think, well, what if? Mm-hmm. And I know Doherty is not a very popular figure, but I like him, and I do have a bit of a soft spot for that side. Again, through bias once again, because I've been fortunate enough to work with so many of them.
No, that's great. Well, they sound like two fascinating books, and The Man Who Kept the Red Flag Flying High, he's getting great reviews at the moment. So congratulations on that. Hopefully selling well, and if it's not, head over to Amazon where it's available in hardcover, and I presume other bookstores.
All good bookstores.
All good bookstores. Well, Wayne, thank you very much for joining us. Congratulations again on the new book, and I look forward to reading the post-Fergie digest and the look at the mid-70s and Tommy Doherty. I think there'll be two fascinating subjects to cover as well. Thanks a lot.
I really look forward to reading that. That sounds like a really interesting read about someone who's just invaluable in United's history.
All right, let's leave it there and move on to two games this week. We've got midweek game against Bournemouth, and who are 38 points now, and that should be enough. I think that's 10 points ahead of Southampton. It would be absolutely extraordinary. I think all the models are showing 37 as probably being safe. So, given how little their budget is, and size of their squad and all that, another very fine performance from Bournemouth this season. A young English manager, Eddie Howe, who will still be called a young English manager when he's on to his 12th English club in 10 years' time.
Like Jesse Lingard, the perennial young player.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he'll have retired and he'll still be young, dabbing his way into retirement. So look, game against Bournemouth, it doesn't mean much other than for placings at this point. What do you think about this one? Down to the South Coast in midweek, so absolute bitch for the fans who are going, and probably not ideal to have a game midweek before the FA Cup game at the weekend.
The thing is, the weather forecast for the middle of this week is absolutely stunning. So maybe the fans that have got to travel should try and get there early and have a day out by the seaside, because that could be nice. You said that Bournemouth are probably safe, but it's not just about points, is it? They are, like you say, 10 points ahead of Southampton, although technically Southampton have a game in hand. But there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams between the two. So it would be... a momentous collapse at this point. Like, they would have to get so
It would, although, Bournemouth down to West Ham in 15th is one game basically, and West Ham have 2 games in hand. So,
but
it's there are a lot of teams for sure. It would be stunning for them to go down. And I think actually what will probably happen, given how bad, Southampton were very good against Chelsea for a half and then very, very bad.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect they're going to go down in Stoke, and Mark Hughes will have managed to relegate 2 clubs in one season.
That's really, really
good work.
Impressive. You should just get him. There's a vacancy at West Brom. Should get him in there as well. Just pop across to West Brom.
Just for a laugh.
Relegate all 3 teams.
Pub quiz.
Yeah. No, so Bournemouth's recent home record, as you would expect for a team that is right bang in mid-table, which is where they actually are, rather than as part of the relegation story. They're really part of the mid-table story at this point. So taking it back to the middle of February, when they lost away 4-1 to Huddersfield. After that, they at home only, they've drawn with Newcastle, got heavily beaten by Spurs. Beaten West Brom. Well, it must be a seriously good team if they can beat West Brom at home. And drawn with Crystal Palace. So, not particularly good results. United. This shouldn't even be this should be no contest. This should be a repeat of last season, a comfortable 3-1. We'll see. We'll see how this team react to that defeat. Generally speaking, there haven't been. Have we lost 2 games in a row in the league this season? I'm not sure we have. Not that I can draw to mind.
No, there was that period in December where we drew 3 games in a row.
Yeah.
But, no, I don't know. I can't remember. Yeah. Bournemouth, they've switched between flat back 4 and a 3 at the back quite a bit this season, and played 3 against Liverpool at the weekend, and it really didn't work. And Ake and Cook and Francis looked all out of place, I'd say. So I'm going to assume they go back to a back 4 for this game. And and they've got some neat players. They're playing 97-year-old Jermaine Defoe up front. I don't know. We'll see if he played most of the game at Liverpool, so he may not start. Josh King, lots of pace. Ex-United player, of course. Jordan Ibe hasn't quite lived up to the £15 million that they spent on him, I'd say, but he's done all right. So
it used to be a lot of money.
They're good, solid team. And they got some decent players, and they're good value for mid-table. But of course, this is a type of side United should absolutely smash. But it's hard to say that's definitely going to happen this time around. Maybe a reaction from Liverpool will be forthcoming, or maybe they'll all be looking at the semi-final and going, I don't want to get an injury.
Yeah, talking of injuries, nice that Callum Wilson has been back in the team and back scoring goals, given that, he had a horrible injury last season after he'd started the season, or maybe even it was the season before now. But, he's kind of struggled with his fitness, and it's good that he's got more Premier League goals than he's ever got before this season. He was absolutely vital to them when they came up from the Championship, and he's kind of... He struggled to prove that he could do it at the Premier League level, but he's basically been able to prove that this season. And also Josh King is having a decent career, because, we enjoyed Josh King in the United youth team, didn't we? He was it was a good player to have around, and he clearly had something. And this is about the level you'd kind of expect, but it's a pretty decent level. So I think that'll do for the Bournemouth game. Because really, the big game... Yeah,
let's talk about Spurs and the semi-final.
This is the big game, isn't it? This is the one. You've said a few times in this episode, I think, and certainly over the last few weeks, maybe winning a trophy. It's a big, big, big maybe at this point, isn't it?
Well, it is big maybe. The other semi-final is Chelsea and Southampton. Chelsea, who are not having a great end to the season. They were abysmal against Southampton for... What was it, 60 minutes until they scored, 65 minutes?
Yeah.
Just wandering, some of the players wandering around looking at their shoes. So maybe they'll be up for the big games. But there's definitely a path through if United can beat Spurs, who are pretty good at home, but got just so totally dominated by City at the weekend. You can see their vulnerabilities. It's going to be a massive game, and United were very poor against Spurs at Wembley earlier in the season.
It's strange comparing United and Spurs this season, isn't it? Because, we're ahead of them in the league, so therefore we're having a better season than them, therefore we're a better team than them, right? Or is that right? I'm not sure it is. They've scored more goals than us this season, not by much, but two more goals than us, which actually... given that Liverpool and City have both scored substantially more, it's not so impressive that they've scored 65 goals, but we've seen that Harry Kane is extremely keen to be credited with as many of those goals as possible.
Yes, that joke got old quite quickly.
Oh, well, I'm not on Twitter, so it's still new for me. But yeah, their form leading into the City game was very good. I mean, they lost to Juve, but that was
really tight.
Just brutal.
And they were probably the superior side over the two legs. So.
Yeah. And then since then, they smashed Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, finally lifting that hoodoo. And like you said, the game between us and them at Wembley earlier this season, I mean, United were spectacularly awful in that game, but Tottenham were also absolutely excellent. Was it 2-0 in the end? It was one of those games where it was 2-0, but it could have been 7 or something.
Yeah, 2-0, 2-1. Did we get one back?
Maybe. Anyway, it was a game which we were comfortably the worst side. Hold on, I have to look it up at this point because I'm curious. Yeah, 2-0 Spurs. The game we got one back in was the 3-1 at the back end of last season, the last game at White Hart Lane, when Rooney scored.
Right. So look, it's going to be. This is a massive game, and what? So is Jose going to stick with 4-3-3, and which is the one he should do? I mean, notwithstanding a poor performance from Pogba, which you mentioned earlier at the weekend, it's the formation that offers United the best possible balance. Is he going to do that? Will Spurs play 3 at the back or 4 at the back? I mean, they've mostly been playing 4 at the back recently. But they've switched between them at times this season. Will they play? Most of the Spurs side picks itself, but it's Son or Lamela on the left-hand side, and Lamela was pretty poor against City. Got hauled off, but probably 20 minutes later than he should have been. So lots of big questions, I think, and I don't imagine United running away with this because Spurs are a very good side.
Yeah, the ways we've had success against Spurs in the Mourinho-Pochettino era has been to play over the top of them, essentially, which actually City did for the Gabriel Jesus goal.
That's actually pretty much the way that United have had success against any decent side. It's low block and play slightly direct.
I mean, in the Liverpool game, the Arsenal game, they weren't quite like that. But yeah, you're right.
Well, no, the Arsenal game at home where... At the Emirates, where they had 31 shots, defended around our box all the time. That one,
exactly. Relying on this power of narrative to win games, but so you would imagine that will be how we set up, and so you'd think he might drop Mata again and go Lingard in that front 3.
Yes, I think that's quite likely.
And then you'd have Matic, Herrera, presumably like McTominay's been forgotten now. So and rightly so, by the way. But Herrera, who has kind of played okay against City and then not great against West Brom. So I don't even know if do you want to play him against Spurs? But you can't leave. Obviously, you can't have Pogba and Matic in a 2 in that game. I mean, I guess
no, because they're going to be up against. I mean, there'll be Dembele and Dyer in the holding for Spurs, but and Eriksen and Ali sort of dancing, and I guess Son sort of dancing around in front of them. So it's this game is definitely going to be won or lost in central midfield,
and that is worrying for United. Because winning or losing games in central midfield has not been great for us, even though in the last 2 seasons we've substantially upgraded that position. It's still, this Mourinho side does not have... I mean, so much of it is form dependent. Matic has looked imperious sometimes and woeful others. And actually, you could say the same about Pogba as well. So there's a huge question mark that I don't know how you analyse this without just being completely reductive, but... so much of the result of this game depends on which version of United's players turns up. Not so much what version of Mourinho turns up, because broadly speaking, we know he's parked the bus, as it were, once this season. He's likely to play low block direct, but that's fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. You can do that well or you can do that badly. And if we do that well, we've got a chance. But we've equally got this almost, I would say, an identical chance of we see us doing that badly and getting absolutely hammered.
So who plays for United? I mean, most of the team, I guess, picks itself. It's central defence that's the interesting one, isn't it? Assuming we have Valencia at young fullback and he doesn't go mental and drop De Gea for some reason. They pick themselves. And then which two of Lindelof, Smalling and Bailly is it going to be?
Well, I would 100% go Bailly Lindelof, and he went Bailly Lindelof for he went Smalling Lindelof for City. Yeah, he did. In fact, he hasn't done Bailly Lindelof, has he? So he's been
and Bailly's barely fit. I mean, 2 years into his United career, there's a lot. I mean, he's obviously United's best defender by absolutely miles. But also hardly ever fit, which is a pattern, of course, for United defenders over the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe we could say then it'll be Smalling and Lindelof, but it's just very upsetting that Chris Smalling's almost like got a guaranteed start. I don't see anything about his performances that would warrant him having a guaranteed start in these big games. And actually, I have to say, this is one of the defensive Mourinho. He does quite often seem to see this, and there's been quite a lot of times where you've expected him to do, like, pull off a nightmare, like picking Fellaini over Pogba or whatever, and he doesn't really do that very often. So maybe we will see a Bailly Lindelof here, but it seems like a long shot. I think it'll be Smalling and probably Lindelof, I guess. Or maybe Smalling and Bailly.
So what are your predictions?
So Smalling and Bailly, and then in midfield, that one we've picked, and front three, Alexis, Lingard, Lukaku, which I don't think is the worst shout. Although I do feel like every time we talk about United's attack, I want to hold up a banner that says we should not just be accepting the fate of Anthony Martial and Marcus Rashford. Like we should.
No, that's right.
It's so stupid. I mean, like we had a little exchange on the WhatsApp. Lots of rumours about Martial wanting to leave. If I was Anthony Martial, I would definitely leave Manchester United this summer. There's no point in him being there. There's plenty of teams that are currently more successful that will pay him just as much and play him every week.
That's a very sad state of affairs. Mourinho's managed to, he compressed two players into one with getting Martial and Rashford to job share. Now he's compressed three players into one in buying Sanchez. So it doesn't seem like the optimal use of United's talent.
The one player that he's combined them into is just Alexis Sanchez.
Basically, yeah. Who hasn't justified that yet? He had a decent half against City, but he actually only touched the ball 11 times.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, he was very effective with those 11 touches. But yeah, it wasn't. So I think I made the point on Twitter that he could and should be doing more for a player of his talent.
No doubt.
If he can make that much of an impact in 11 touches, he needs the ball more often. He needs to do that more often because it's not been that often since he joined United. Maybe we'll see the best of him next season. Okay, well, look, we're near to wrapping up the show. There's a couple other things I thought we were going to mention. United won the Under-18s League this week, beating City.
Yes, fantastic stuff, especially given, all the hand-wringing that's gone on over the past few years about City taking over in terms of youth development in Manchester. This is a great sign, and also because I think a lot of the very, very talented under-18s have gone up to under-23s, haven't they? And the first team indeed. So really, really impressive and well done to them.
Yeah, and look, I would caution, having seen plenty of youth football over the years, I'd caution against reading too much into one season and saying, this means that United's youth production line is right and we're going to be following loads of those players into the first team, because it just doesn't work like that. There are definite cycles in youth football depending on the age cohort you have. Actually, this is a reasonably young cohort of under-18s. So look, it's very positive. I wouldn't say suddenly all of those players are going to be making it into the first team picture. But much more positive than 2 years ago. Then, as you said, people were very worried about United having taken their eye off the ball when it came to youth football. And the final thing I wanted to talk about this week: United apparently shelving plans to expand Old Trafford. Have done a feasibility study and think it would be too expensive, and they'd have to shut down the stand for a couple of years, which is a shame. I think.
Wow, that's
feels a bit short-sighted.
It is a shame because something does need to be done. But perhaps it's just about timing and all that kind of stuff. And it's the last thing the club need at the moment, to have a half-empty stadium and all that kind of stuff. So maybe that's got something to do with it. Something that's much less short-sighted. Did this happen this week? It might have happened while I was off poorly, but I don't think we've talked about on a podcast. United, some actual, proper, genuine good news. I've applied to the Premier League, the governing bodies, the relevant governing bodies, to have a women's team enter formal competition, which is, you could say it's overdue, and that's fair enough. It certainly is, and it should never have been scrapped in the first place. It was part of the Glazer-nomics era, but absolutely fantastic news that they're going to spend some money on this.
Yeah. The way I read between the lines of what their statement, first, excellent news, and we've talked about this in the past. It's not too big a congratulations, because it should have been in place years and years ago and should never have been shut down, but excellent news. The way I read between the lines of the statement is that United are not going to be spending huge amounts of money on this sort of city. This will be a path from the women's youth football teams that United do run into a first team, and they're applying to Premier League 2 or Super League 2 or whatever it's called. So we'll see. I don't expect United to be suddenly become a dominant force in women's football, but it's important that we do have a club, and the last standout in sort of amongst the major European powers is now Real Madrid. Anyway.
I think more than anything, girls growing up supporting United should be able to dream about playing for them.
Yeah.
It's almost as simple as that for me. Anyway, so before we end the show, in time-honoured Rantcast fashion, let's make a total between us of 4 incorrect predictions about what the score in these 2 games will be.
Did we make predictions last week? I can't remember now. So I think United will,
we did. I predicted
will draw at Bournemouth. Let's call it 2-2. Exciting game, bit open. And, oh God, I kind of think we might lose to Spurs, but I'm not going to predict that because that's just wrong. So I'm going to predict a 2-1 victory in the FA Cup semi-final.
I think that we'll beat Bournemouth by 1 goal, so like 2-1 maybe. And I think I'm just going to go with what I actually think is going to happen, not what I want to happen, and predict that we are going to lose to Tottenham Hotspur at Wembley. Also 2-1 in the other direction.
Ouch. Of course. All right, well, we'll record another one of these next week, assuming I make it back from the US in one piece and don't crash and burn as I nearly did last time. Not
if
quite.
You don't, I'll find someone else to do it with.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Let's get a show out. It's what you'd have wanted.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think you should probably get Housen on.
Thanks for listening, everyone. That was a fun episode of the Rantcast complaining about José Mourinho and Manchester United. It would be lovely if we've got a celebratory podcast next weekend. Let's see what happens. Come on, you Reds! The Rantcast is a crowd-funded project, which means we don't have any advertising. We just rely on the listeners for their support. That's listeners like you. For various different levels, you can get various different rewards if you choose to contribute something to the show at patreon.com/Rantcast. And any amount is really appreciated. Even if you don't want to contribute a large amount, just $1 a month. If all our listeners paid us $1 a month, well, we could do a lot more Rantcasts, let's just say. But anyway, thanks to everyone who does back. If you back above $5 plus VAT a month, then you get access to bonus content, which we do after every episode. And this week, our bonus content was about great FA Cup semi-final moments. It's one of the most beautiful goals ever. Certainly, from a United fan's perspective, any of the so the defending's pretty terrible, but who cares when it looks that good? And after the game, Gary Newbond says to Alex Ferguson, well, that's not what you would have wanted, is it? Extra time and I think a man sent off. Yeah, because King got sent off. Extra time, a man sent off. And Ferguson just looks at him and says, look, who's to know what's going to happen in football, Gary? It could all blow up in our faces at the end of the day. But can you forget moments like this? Our supporters will be talking about that for years. Here we are talking about it. The players will be talking about it for years. That's what football's about, trying to reach peaks and climaxes to a season, which we're doing at the moment. We're in a final. We've got something in the bank for ourselves. And now we go and try and win this league now. Oh... Did he ever?
Magic.
Underrated orator, Alex Ferguson. Just
We've tried the new dad. It doesn't work.
No.
Can we have Fergie back, please?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.